Welcome back to the Vince Coglianese Show. It is time, as usual, for our regular look at the election, its integrity, and whether or not all of this is going to be on the up and up. Joining us now to discuss this is Ken Cuccinelli. He's the national chairman of the Election Transparency Initiative, and he's been following all of this very, very closely. Ken, good to have you back with us, sir.
Always good to be with you, Vince. Thanks for having me.
All right, how's the picture looking out there? I do see, banning Zuckerbucks all across the country, and some of these states that have imposed good election integrity initiatives and laws. It does seem like some things are headed in the right direction.
Yeah, overall, we've made real progress. I mean, if you think of where we were at this time in 2020 versus where we are now, we are in a much, much better place. In terms of election security and transparency, and frankly, the participation of just ordinary citizens who are right of center in the whole process, which is really how we've secured, for instance, Virginia elections to the extent we have. We haven't gotten any law changes there because the Democrats have blocked it, but over 4,000 new Virginians have stepped forward and been trained as election officials and gone inside. And everybody listening to you and me right now, Vince, can do that themselves, and they should. They should, and they can find info on that at whoscounting.us. Sign up and get involved.
Yeah, that's key. People are always asking how they can help. That's a really obvious and good way to help your country. The other piece that I'm interested in is, to what extent is there a coordinated effort to ensure election integrity nationwide? The Republican National Committee has just changed leadership and has a new RNC chairman and co-chairwoman. They seem to be placing a lot of emphasis on election integrity. I noticed there's also some staffing changes going on at the RNC right now, supposedly to improve the picture there as well. What do you make of the national effort?
So first of all, I have only ever in my life had one good thing to say about the Republican National Committee, and this is it. And that is that they have finally gotten more aggressive in stepping into the litigation arena to protect elections. They've been doing that since 2020. As you noted, the two new chairs have also made what sounds to me like a very credible commitment to continue that and hopefully even step it up to another level, because ordinary voters just don't have standing like the party does. So they can bring cases that say the Election Transparency Initiative or I as an individual voter couldn't bring. So that's a really, really important development. And one of the two areas where we've really closed the gap that are kind of surprising since 2020 are we've closed the litigation gap where the left still has a substantial advantage, but it's much smaller than it used to be. They have a whole infrastructure of money and lawyers. We don't really have the equivalent yet. And as I mentioned before, in staffing inside actual election offices, we have closed that gap. They still lead, but we have a lot more folks proportionally who are right of center, Republican, conservative, call them whatever you want, who are inside actually running the poll books, counting the ballots. This is how the big cheat in 2021 in Virginia was caught. It was by one of these new election officials who called out the fact that Fairfax County wasn't following the voter ID law for absentee ballots. That was for hundreds and hundreds of ballots, and it stopped because of that identification and calling it out. So this really works, and in those two areas, we've gotten a whole lot better, and that's on top of banning Zuckerbucks in over half the states, improving voter ID, most recently in North Carolina and Ohio. So there's been a real progress. If we had a D in 2020, we're probably at a C plus, B minus as a country now. Virtually all the swing states have improved except Michigan and Nevada have gotten worse. So it isn't perfect news everywhere, but it is good news in most places.
Yeah, I saw, like, for instance, in Pennsylvania a couple weeks ago, we had litigation that prevailed that said that, look, if you're going to send in an absentee ballot, it has to have accurate information, which seems like a baseline for submitting a ballot anywhere. But that's a positive development, and that's only because of the efforts of people on the right undertaking that election integrity push.
Well, that's right, Vince. And it was with a Democrat-leaning federal court of appeals. I mean, they rejected the rather outlandish legal theories that Mark Elias and the lawyers on the left have been bringing, and they hoped they'd be in a Democrat court, so they just give them what they want. And the judges did their job, and the question was, are those things you just identified material under the Voting Rights Act? And they were never intended to be material, and they're not. And so the laws stand, and Pennsylvania gets to take those steps to secure its absentee ballot, and that's good for all of us.
Let me move to another issue that I know that you're very interested in. I am too, which is the extent to which the left is trying to make it so that people who are not citizens can vote in order to make permanent Democrat power, which sounds crazy, but it is a push. There are various municipalities, including right here in our area, that already allow this to take place in local elections. Give us a sense of the latest efforts to allow non-citizens to vote, including in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, Washington, D.C. has done it. Literally, if you live in the Russian embassy for 30 days, you get to vote in D.C. elections. Even the Washington Post ran an editorial saying this is crazy. They're literally letting our enemies vote in the elections of the nation's capital. It's nuts. And Americans don't agree with this. This is a project of the radical left, Democrats, and 80 plus, 85% plus of Americans agree with us that only U.S. citizens should vote in any elections in America, whether they be federal, state, or local. Are you listening, Tacoma Park? You know, and today we had a press conference. Representative Chip Roy and Senator Mike Lee, along with Speaker Johnson, are advancing the SAVE Act to wipe out 30 years of bad case law that stops states from demanding documentation to prove citizenship in support of the laws of the state that require people to be U.S. citizens to vote. And it'll be nice to have that vote in the House. I'm not so crazy as to think Chuck Schumer will bring it up, but it'll be great to get Democrats on the record and, frankly, Republicans on the record for that. And hopefully we'll get control of both houses in the next election and actually pass it through. We really need to clear that out. The H.R. 1 bill that you and I talked about many times on your show from 2 years back, 3 years back, the Democrats had a provision that ordered states, that mandated states to dump millions of non-citizens onto their voter rolls automatically. And then another provision that essentially removed the penalty for non-citizens voting, because it's technically illegal for non-citizens to vote. And, you know, they, in that two-step process, they would have literally added millions of non-citizens to the voter rolls overnight and removed the punishments for them voting. That is an effort, and recently uncovered is a transcript from the Biden White House, where they passed when Biden signed his Biden Bucks executive order to try to turn the federal government into a Democrat Party voter turnout machine. They were lamenting in that meeting how unfortunate it was that so many people opposed non-citizens voting. So this is in the White House, the Biden White House. This is in the Democrats in Congress. That they want to get non-citizens voting, and we want to see more and more protections to avoid this ever happening. This is our country, and one of the privileges of citizenship is deciding how it's run and led, and that means citizens are the only ones who should get to vote.
I don't know if there's a better expression of political elitism and contempt for the populace than straight up saying, you know, we don't like your votes, so we're going to bring in a bunch of outsiders to actually vote the way we want them to.
Well, yes, and let's not forget that it's racist or ethnicist. The presumption that fill in the blank for a Democrat is no different than the presumption about black votes and the presumption about Hispanic votes, and it starts with this presumption that people don't think for themselves. Now, it may be that they'll all know who let them in and let them vote, and that they are grateful. And that's a consequence of the open borders. But hopefully President Trump's going to win and the Congress will cooperate, and it'll take Congress cooperating to do the mass deportations necessary
Yes.
to empty tens of millions of illegal aliens out of this country.
But, as you point out, the whole point of this is it's animated by a power principle that, will this give us more power? So their view is like, let's let all these non-citizens vote because it's going to make Democrat power permanent. And which brings me to another question about voter registration. I keep seeing interesting polling data that shows that among Americans, not non-citizens, but actual citizens, who are not registered to vote, there is a wild degree of support for Donald Trump. And it's led to some debate on the left now, which for years has claimed that all they want to do is just register every last soul in the United States of America. Suddenly, there are all sorts of lefty organizations that are fighting amongst themselves about trying to stop people from registering to vote because too many of those people might support Trump. What do you make of this latest change in what's going on in our elections?
So that has been humorous. I do love to see it when all of their presumptions about groupthink blow up in their face, and then they have these internal spats. And this is one of them. And they've been operating on presumptions, not good-heartedness, lest anybody think that who's listening. And they presume that they're going to go register this type of voter and they'll vote Democrat. And that isn't necessarily happening anymore. So if you think, as they do, they have this racist thought that all we have to do is sign up new black voters. I'm picking this one group for discussion, not because they're the focus of the memo. And surely they'll all vote Democrat. Well, that thought is a racist thought, first of all. And now there's a shift toward Trump that's freaking the left out. So they're trying to figure out, all right, how do I figure out where where Trump-leaning black voters might be so I can avoid registering those black voters? And that is hard for them. That is very difficult for them to manage. And frankly, that's a credit to Trump's appeal across the spectrum. You'll recall that in Trump's 4 years of his first term, we spent more time under 8% black unemployment than the rest of our lives combined. And the whole rest of years in my life, there hasn't been that much time under 8% unemployment for black Americans as there was just under President Trump. And it was an extraordinary rates in history. Everybody thinks these tax cuts are for the rich. That's what the left wants you to say. But the deregulation, the enforcement of our immigration laws, and economic growth-focused tax cuts led to more improvements for poor people who are disproportionately minorities than anybody else. And that's giving the Democrats fits when it comes to registering voters, because there's no guarantee anymore that these folks will vote Democrat. And they're openly gnashing their teeth and rending their garments about it, and they don't quite know what to do about it.
And meanwhile, it's a massive invitation to Republicans to double down on voter registration efforts. Do you have faith that those numbers are growing and that they will grow ahead of Election Day?
Yeah, there is more of that effort. We still don't come anywhere near the left, but there's more of that effort going on the right than ever before. And that's very encouraging for obvious reasons. And I hope, and this is important, is that it be sustainable. The left has built up this whole election process infrastructure since 2004. They've been doing this for 20 years. This can't just be about fixing 2020 for our side and then we go back to business as usual. We need to stay in this space forever to make sure that elections are secure and transparent and always improving. They're either improving or getting worse. It's always one or the other. They're never standing still. So we need to be deeply engaged. And I will tell you, as you know, I've been involved in conservative movement for decades. I have never seen the right of center world, which isn't just conservative, for so long on an issue as we have on election security and reform. It's been very encouraging, and we need that to continue for many years into the future. I mentioned we've gone from a D to a C plus B minus in our elections from 2020 to today. But that still means we have a long way to go. So, and a lot of states to get there, to do a little Smokey and the Bandit riff there. But
Amen.
but we're going to stay with it, and I have a lot of confidence that this year's election is going to be far better than 2020. Doesn't mean there won't be problems, but we're a lot better prepared to deal with them than we've ever been before.
Yeah, and either way, the one thing that will make it a great one is huge turnout, regardless of the state of any individual state's elections. Thank you very much. Ken Cuccinelli, as always, from the Election Transparency Initiative. Good to talk to you, sir.
Always a pleasure, Vince. Thanks for having me.
Coming up on the Vince Coglianese Show, with the prospect of Donald Trump winning the election this year, NATO countries are beginning to freak out that he's going to make them pay up the defense obligations that they have to pay. So that is kind of fascinating what's going on there. Also, when it comes to Ukraine and Russia, what is the update in that conflict? Joe Biden has been claiming for some time, if we just keep giving them more money and weapons, that Ukraine's going to win this thing. How come the Ukrainians don't feel like that? How come the Russians don't feel like that? We will explore that and so much more with the excellent Rebekah Koffler. She's a former DIA intelligence officer and the author of Putin's Playbook. She's got the update on that subject for us ahead on the Vince Coglianese Show. Welcome back to the Vince Coglianese Show. A lot of attention, of course, paid on what's going on in the Middle East, but I do want to step back for a moment and once again look at what's happening between Russia and Ukraine and what comes next. We have a couple of headlines this week indicating that Ukrainian soldiers, the Associated Press says that their rear defensive lines barely even exist amid a Russian advance. Additionally, the Washington Post says that Russia is now confident of victory over Ukraine. In fact, Russia is exhibiting what they refer to as Western war trophies, including American M1 tanks that Russia has seized and now displaying in their own streets as trophies. For more on what's happening there and what comes next, I want to bring in Rebekah Koffler. She's a former DIA intelligence agent turned author, the host of the Censored But Not Silenced podcast, and the author of the book Putin's Playbook. And she's got an upcoming book called American Bolsheviks, The Persecution of Donald Trump and the Sovietization of America. Rebekah, great to have you back with us.
Great to be with you, Vince, and your listeners today.
You're always so busy, so I'm really appreciative of your time. Russia, we keep hearing all these updates that actually, despite the efforts by Ukraine to fight back here, it looks like Russia is heading towards some sort of victory. What is your assessment?
Well, absolutely. In fact, one can interpret that Russia has already achieved victory, and that is because Russia's definition of victory is very different from Western definition. Remember why Putin invaded Ukraine? It's to restore Russia's strategic security perimeter, right, on which they relied for centuries. And that shrunk with the collapse of the Soviet Union from 1,000 miles to 100 miles. So no sane military commander would allow this type of proximity to an adversarial alliance such as NATO. We wouldn't if China or Russia situated themselves as close as Mexico or Canada. And so Putin made it a red line for Ukraine to join NATO. And as long as he wages this war that has already crossed is into the third year, right? He has achieved victory because Ukraine is not in NATO by virtue of not meeting the two key requirements. First, absence of territorial integrity, because Russia annexed, part of Ukraine, and then second, there's an ongoing conflict right now in Ukraine, and that disqualifies them from becoming part of NATO. So that is the short definition of victory. And of course, the Washington Post is absolutely correct. Putin is confident because Russia holds an overwhelming military and economic advantage over Ukraine because Putin has transitioned the Russian military and economy onto a wartime footing at least 7 years prior to his invasion of Ukraine.
So, you mentioned the phrase the security perimeter that he's concerned, Putin's concerned about the proximity of NATO to his country. But that has led some people to claim that what Putin wants to do is reconstitute the Soviet Union's security perimeter almost entirely, and in fact start moving west. My impression is you don't think that that's very likely. That you don't think he's set on invading Poland. Why is that?
That is very simple. Putin is not suicidal. Invading Poland, which is a NATO member, would automatically trigger Article 5, collective defense, which means that the entire NATO's warfighting machine, which includes one of the best or the best military in the entire military history, which is the U.S. military, against Russia. And Putin is acutely aware that Russia is conventionally inferior to NATO. So he would never make such a move. It is illogical, and claims to the contrary simply have no basis. And in fact, there are several intelligence assessments made by the U.S. intelligence community that entirely refute that completely absurd claim.
Poland itself decided in September of last year to stop sending new arms to Ukraine. They're saying that instead that they were going to focus more on arming themselves going forward. What is the message from that, if not Poland not being concerned at all about keeping the fight going in Ukraine?
Well, it's not. Yes, Poland is also a rational actor. Poland sees that both the United States and many European countries have depleted their own military arsenals, their weapons arsenals, by continuing the flow of billions of dollars of worth of weaponry and cash in aid to Ukraine. And so they realized that they were caught effectively with their pants down, if you will, because despite the fact that we knew back in the intelligence community what Putin's plans were. In fact, I personally, as one of the top 3 analysts in the entire U.S. intelligence community on Russian warfighting doctrine and strategy and Putin's thinking, I personally briefed multiple times the Obama administration, White House, and NATO itself in September 2013 in the run-up to Putin's invasion of Crimea. So everybody knew everything, and yet they decided that they were not going to prepare for it. Not clear whether they didn't believe it or it's just pure recklessness, but to this day, only 8 countries out of 32 NATO countries contribute even 2% of their GDP to defense, right? They never bothered to beef up their force posture. The U.S. never bothered to develop a viable counter strategy and a deterrent strategy to Putin. And of course, now they are basically reaping the results, the consequences of that. Of course, Poland has to conserve its weaponry. It's just a prudent act. But Poland knows, because Poland was briefed as a NATO member on intelligence that is available on all the wargaming that we conducted. In no war games, Russia outright invaded a NATO country, not in an offensive operation.
Do you think that these NATO countries are going to start increasing their own, in other words, are they going to meet their commitments going into the future here with the prospect of Donald Trump returning to office? Because in the first place, this was a big piece of Trump's relationship with NATO was forcing its member countries to actually up their defense spending. It was a success. The NATO Secretary General was publicly praising over time Donald Trump for his efforts to get NATO countries to pay more for their own defense. And now I've seen these reports that NATO countries are nervous that Trump is coming back and are beginning to increase their spending as a result. Do you think that's going to hold?
I'm hopeful, but my intelligence analysis tells me that unfortunately it is unlikely to happen. Look at what is happening in Germany. Germany is the richest country in Europe, and even they don't contribute even 2%. The Europeans are just way too comfortable with their, social comfort creatures, if you will. For decades, they've been reliant on the United States to provide for their security, and they've gotten quite used to that. And most importantly, their population. So I think if the European governments are going to try to increase defense spending and to decrease social spending, there could be some unrest. And that's why I don't believe that it is possible in the numbers and the quantities needed for NATO to actually beef up its capability, beef up its security posture to the point when they're ready to face Russia, if such thing is ever to happen.
So, on the big picture on the war itself, this has been devastating. I mean, a lot of Russians have definitely died, and many Ukrainians. We're hearing estimates of hundreds of thousands of people dead here. Was it worth it? One, and what has it achieved? What has all this death achieved? And could it have been avoided?
So you're absolutely right, Vince. A lot of Russians, just like a lot of Ukrainians, have been killed or wounded. 300,000 Russians, right, and approximately 200,000 Ukrainians, even though President Zelensky's government is trying to conceal those numbers. Is it worth it? Well, it depends whom you're talking about. For Putin and Russia, it is worth it because, again, they view this first as a defensive operation to beef up its security perimeter against NATO that the Russians have seen getting closer and closer to Russia's borders, right? And now with the admission of Finland and Sweden, NATO is the closest that it has ever been in history to the Russian borders. So, and then secondly, the Russians believe that Ukrainian lands are part of Russia because that is how Russia originated with the Kievan Rus. That is the land that is occupied by modern Ukraine. Interestingly, 77% of Russians support what the Russian military is doing in Ukraine because of that belief. The Russians believe that Ukraine is just part of Russia, period. So effectively, they're supporting Putin. So for them, it is worth it because they believe they're defending themselves from NATO. Is it worth it for Ukraine? I don't believe so. Ukraine's population is 3 times less of Russia's. It's 43 million against 143 of Russia. And so the casualty toll is so much higher. The impact is so much more significant to Ukraine. And for what? The Ukraine effectively still has lost 20% of its territory to Russia. And that territory will likely never be returned to Ukraine. And so there's no end in sight to the war in Ukraine. In fact, DNI Avril Haines just recently, a few days ago in a congressional testimony, stated that the war in Ukraine is going to continue with no end. And what does it mean? That all these billions that we have poured have not really achieved anything. But for the United States, at least that's what the elites are telling us, it's worth it because they're throwing Ukrainians into
Well,
Putin's legal that supposedly to prevent the deployment of U.S. troops into the theater, which is an absurd argument.
the other piece is just, it's really sad to think about the impact this is going to have on Ukraine in the long run as well, because the numbers that you just said, about 250,000 people, 250,000 Ukrainians dead, those are 250,000 young men who are gone. That has a big impact on a country.
Absolutely, and these young men, child-producing age men, so it's going to have a tremendous impact on the population, on the birth rates, on their labor pool, et cetera, et cetera. It is a very, very sad story, and all of that is a result of a pure incompetence of our Washington establishment national security apparatus.
Yeah.
Because we had the best intelligence in the world on Russia. We knew exactly what Putin's plans were, right? And yet we were caught off guard. How is that possible? I have no idea.
Finally, let me, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but because we're short on time, I do want to bring up one other piece, which is this week, a Ukrainian-born congresswoman by the name of Victoria Spartz, a Republican, she just won her primary, and it was interesting to watch over time the way that she's been treated in Congress. When the war first broke out, she was used as a sort of a prop by Congress to justify immense military and financial spending in Ukraine. But eventually, she turned against all of this because of the corruption going on in Ukraine and began raising red flags about it. And as a result, members of Congress of both parties basically tried to sideline her. She just won her primary again for re-election this week. What do you make of that saga?
Well, first of all, I am very proud and thankful to Victoria for her courage to go against the establishment and to speak the truth about the corruption in Ukraine. Look, Ukraine is not a democracy. It will likely never be a democracy. It is just only slightly less corrupt than Russia, which is one of the most corrupt countries in the world. Right. And so, unfortunately, Victoria in the beginning allowed to be made a prop, right? Because it's not like she suddenly learned that Ukraine was a corrupt country. She knew that all along. She knows her patience, if you will, right? But finally, she gained courage and she speaks the truth. And it's very ironic that the elite now turned on her because she doesn't agree with the party line.
It is amazing to watch, and you're so good at observing all of it and breaking it down for us. Rebekah Koffler, thank you so much for your time, as always. My thanks again to Lee Zeldin, the Congressman, Ken Cuccinelli, Rebekah Koffler, all of the great guests that we've had today and always. Maybe you only listen to this program during a certain window of time each day, perhaps when you're in your car and you're traveling and you're asking Ed Rodriguez what your traffic patterns are at the moment. Well, that's totally fine. If there's anything else you want to hear from the show that you weren't able to hear because you were at work or you were occupied with, taking care of your family or something, totally fine. We've got a solution for you. It's the podcast. Just check out the Vince Coglianese Show podcast. It's available in all the podcast places. It'll automatically download to your mobile device, and it's great for us. It lets us know that there are people out there, so many great Americans out there who are listening in and trying to get informed here on WMAL. Now, if you want to get informed even further, well, I've got a treat for you. The great one, Mark Levin, is up next right here on the legendary WMAL.